Good afternoon. My name is Renee Robbins, and I'm the industry programmer here at TIFF. And it is my pleasure to welcome you for the afternoon session of our marketing day, day 5. For those of you who are here this morning, you might remember that I stumbled. I didn't remember what day it was, but I'm now certain that today is day 5, and it is Monday. So thank you, thank you. I'm sure you all feel the same way. It's been a crazy TIFF so far. There's so much happening every day and every night, and I'm really, really pleased to see you guys here in your numbers for these sessions every day. It's amazing. Before we start, I just want to let you know we have a panel of active disruptors today, and I'm really, really excited about this. I think you guys are in for a treat. I'm going to introduce our moderator, Marian Koltai-Levine. She's the Executive VP of the Film Department at PMK BNC, and they have a couple of films here representing throughout the festival. They've represented Beasts of the Southern Wild. She's also represented Horns that's here, and Silver Linings Playbooks before as well. So, just quite involved in the industry for a long time, I think Marian's, quite an esteemed, yeah, she's got some tales. But it is my pleasure to introduce Marian Koltai-Levine, who's going to moderate the panel today on engaging your audience. Marian, it's all yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. As Renee said, in full force, it's so nice to have a large audience out here to hear the panel. I think, I forgot it's actually day 5 myself, but I think what's very exciting at this moment in our industry is we are at a bit of a crossroads, and it's a bit of the Wild West. And I think for the last few years, there's been incredible momentum and incredible opportunity that didn't present itself before. And I think the level of engagement of audiences that have turned into financial ramifications is growing by leaps and bounds. And there are platforms and distribution out there that were never available before. And everybody is starting to have a much higher level of engagement and dialogue. And to that end, I think we have some wonderful representatives to talk about their businesses and opportunities and platforms and how they're doing it and how they're engaging their audiences. So next to me I have Nicolas from Tugg, and Tugg is a particularly interesting new, a year and a half old, you said? So why don't you we'll have everybody introduce themselves, give a little bit of background, and then we'll get into the conversation.
All right, thank you. Tugg is about a year and a half old. It is a web-based platform that enables anybody. Right now, we launched in America, anybody in America to decide what movies come to their local communities. We've partnered with the vast majority of exhibitors, as well as major studios, mini majors, and independent filmmakers, and enable an experience where anybody could log on the site, choose a film they want to see, they select that film, and eventually they're told how many tickets they need to pre-sell within a certain amount of time in order for that event to be confirmed. If that tipping point is reached within that amount of time, the event is confirmed, and Tugg takes care of the rest in terms of getting the film to the theater, ticketing, and everything else. So we're essentially creating an on-demand experience in a movie theater. So.
Is that also in Canada?
Not yet, but coming soon.
Thank you. Hi, this is John from a wonderful destination, which probably a lot of you know, Indiegogo. So why don't you give us a little background on that?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm John Trigonis. I work with Indiegogo. I'm their film, web, video, transmedia guy. Which basically means I help campaigners run successful campaigns, because I'm also the guy who literally wrote the book on the subject of crowdfunding for filmmakers. And that's basically what I spend my day doing, is helping campaigners like you guys. And we are in Canada, and we've been here since the beginning and have had a loyal fan base since with Canadian audiences. So keep it coming, keep the campaigns moving. And and I'm also a kind of social media whiz. I love Twitter. You can't get me off of it. If you see me on my phone, I'm not being rude. I'm simply tweeting some good stuff. So that's
Can you
that.
give us a little idea of the growth at Indiegogo, or is there some kind of how many projects you guys? Because Indiegogo, unlike some of the others, you fund just as you go. It's not like you have to reach an amount and you're funded or not funded.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, you do have to kind of set, you know, deadline dates and stuff like that, you know, an end to your campaign, but we do offer flexible and fixed fundraising options. So one of those means that, yes, if you raise only a partial amount of your money, you still get to keep it. The way we measure success is not by whether or not you hit your goal, but whether or not you get to make the project that you want happen. And by doing, by basically engaging your audience with it, you're going to get some money to make it get forward. And we have like thousands of campaigns, new campaigns per month. I mean, that's just to give you an idea of our growth. And we are the world's literally largest crowdfunding platform and the world's first crowdfunding platform.
This Tessa Sproul, did you say Sproul? Sorry. Who from CBC and runs digital there. And I think it's interesting. We have a lot of theatrical conversation, and here we have probably the largest broadcaster.
Yep,
in Canada?
the largest producer of Canadian content, absolutely by far. Also Canadian, also long history here. I think the thing that I hope I can contribute to this panel is that we are obsessed with audience engagement, as we always have been, but particularly now because there are tools that we can actually see it in our face. And you know, probably those of you in the room that are Canadian content creators, you know that we're an incredibly talented country. We hit above our weight class. You look at like some of the YouTube performers, the Canadians are out in the lead there. It's pretty fantastic. You look at, you know, our music industry, our comedy industry, we have so much talent in this country. The maddening thing for all of us is that it's really hard to get our content discovered. Particularly now in the television space or the video space, I would say we are up against an enormous challenge, because the more people are making decisions based on what their friends are talking about, and the more that what they're hearing about is Duck Dynasty and Honey Boo Boo, and not so much our content. We are using audience engagement techniques to try to get people talking about our stuff and feeling ownership of it and feeling like they have to tell their friends about it because they can't miss it. That, I think, is the key to the future of any content creator, is how do you get your stuff into people's hearts and minds and souls so they tell their friends about it at, you know, the next time that they see them, whether or not it's on Twitter or if it's at a real life dinner table or bar or something.
Thank you. And then Jay, can you give us a little bit about Cinegroup or Cinegroup, excuse me.
Cinegroup.
Cinegroup. I
Kind of like
apologize.
cinema
my fault.
and coup d'etat.
Sorry,
together.
please, all together. Why don't you give us a little bit of background about your new studio model?
Yeah, so we are 100% Canadian right now. We just ran our Canadian pilot in Canada. Some of you may or may not have heard of. So yeah, we're you know, coming up with a name, as you know. We're obviously a disruptive model. We're trying to disrupt the way sub $5 million independent features are basically packaged, marketed, and financed. To look at us, we are a platform and studio model, so we are privately backed, and we do exist kind of like an independent studio, but we don't have a lot of overhead and bricks and mortars. It is actually, we exist on the social web. Basically, think about us kind of like a Y Combinator for film. So we use the word film accelerator a lot, and within 90 days, we have optioned 10 projects when we opened up our basically audience funnel, and you know, filmmakers come to us with a little idea prototype, a little 2-minute trailer. Every week you're given a challenge to basically package and market your project and build audience equity around it. And by the end of it, those who have done a very, very good job, we can't afford not to finance you, as far as I'm concerned. So this year for the pilot, we did one project, and in 90 days, you know, we also have Brad Pellman, who's our head of sales and distribution here, and Brian Wadeen, our COO. You know, we took 10 to con. 5 of them got to pitch live in front of 200 industry decision makers at Banff. And one October 1st goes to camera, which is Wolf Cop, Dirty Harry, Only Harrier.
I think what's, again, fundamental here across the board is everybody is giving sort of the power of choice to the audiences. And I think that's a little, you know, that is clearly the trend, that is clearly changing. We clearly have an opportunity to go out there. I mean, you're all entrepreneurs in your own right. When you were looking at this, what was the genesis of your thoughts about creating Tugg, and how do you envision it moving forward?
Sure. Well, in terms of Tugg and where we've started, I think it was a pretty obvious pain point. I come from a filmmaking background, and as all filmmakers, we dream of having our films in a theater, and it's up until recently become increasingly difficult to get there. However, in America, the utilization rate of the average movie theater is around 15%. So that means 85% of the time it's completely underutilized. It's like an empty hotel. So the theaters are empty. Filmmakers are wanting to get their films in theaters, but it's become increasingly difficult to do so. So it started with a question mark. Why? Why is this existing? Why is this painful process existing if everybody's in need of each other? So we started by really researching that and understanding that it wasn't that theaters, exhibitors don't want to have independent content or more avant-garde or whatever the case would be. It's that they can't afford the speculation of if that's going to draw an audience. If they're at 15%, the risk of going any lower than that is obviously unbearable. So with Tugg, we basically started by reverse engineering. If we could guarantee an audience up front, eliminating the risk for the theater, making it more certain than it would be for even Spider-Man, then they would be able to say yes to so much which they were previously saying no to. So starting with that, we were able to mitigate their risks, arm the audience with the tools to be able to prove that they're there. And then by way of that, when you reverse engineer the supply chain, then it really opens up the doors to infinite possibilities. So that's where we started.
How many screenings are you doing a month?
You know, it varies. This month, or I think late last month, we had over 50 in one day for One Direction's new documentary. We're suddenly increased our base of 16 and under by 150% in that one day. And other times in off-peak months, we'll see that even go up where there's more appetite. So, on average, we're right around 150 events with around 110, 120 people per event. But that's, growing, as others are speaking about, as you reach that 1 year mark, then people that have been waiting to see are starting to understand how they can interact, and so that number's starting to scale.
And Jay, for your involvement of your projects, it's a 9-month cycle. So you're expecting 100 projects being submitted, or what's the growth on that? I mean, it's because I just think that everyone has this opportunity to be their own entrepreneur in a sense.
So just our model is fairly. There's a lot of moving pieces to it, but I'll try and make it as simple as possible. So the actual time from when, say, a group of filmmaker entrepreneurs come in with their trailer to the point where we option it is about 90 days. The point at which it went to camera. With this one was particularly challenging because Saskatchewan didn't have tax credits, and the financing we have involves a bit of soft money too. The ultimate destination is Cineplex, though, so we have a deal with Cineplex, so we have the theatrical in place. So where we want that to hit is actually, we're looking at March, April 2014 is when you're going to be able to see this in theaters. So to make sure that the contract, that kind of social contract, as we like to call it, between the filmmakers, ourselves, and their audience, their fans, is ultimately, that we can deliver on the promise and bring it to, in a timely fashion to market to maintain that enthusiasm. And we're going to be very shortly announcing Cinecoup Season 2, so anybody who's interested. So that next cohort that comes in, the audience they build, not only do they get to leverage the last audience in the platform, but they actually start to build a new audience too, so we're actually doubling down on the potential audience for the movies that are coming out. And yes, we're only, we had enough to finance the one, but already 3 of them look like they're going to get picked up by other established producers, including one team that was actually closed the room at Banff and got their deal. So the potential to actually see more films, and again, for people to stop, because what we saw on the web is there was a lot of people acting like little islands. They were already doing this. They were already building their own sites and building trailers and doing this stuff, but there's no discovery channels between them. So there's a lot of people reinventing the wheel. So a lot of what Cinecoup, the thought behind it was to let's create a country with all kinds of discovery potential. And we're not out to reinvent the wheel. In fact, we've been in discussions with Indiegogo around funding, but at kind of a P&A level, which it's more fun to drive people to that fear of missing out theatrical event in your community. So it's using multiple partners in best practices to achieve maximum results. And yes, you're completely right. We live in a time now, especially for that contract you make with your fan, there's no gatekeepers. You don't have to ask permission. And you know, to steal something from Paul Schrader, it's 1913 again. We get to rewrite all the rules because they don't actually work anymore. So,
which ironically, theaters, you know, have been sort of the slowest to respond to the changing trends. And I think it's been a very difficult process for many theater chains to look at the changing trends, to look at the one-night screenings. I think there's, certainly, I can speak much more about the US than I can in Canada. There's some very traditional aspects that have yet to change. I mean, finally, theaters have now almost all become digital. Whereas, you know, I'd hate to see the 35 millimeter print go entirely, but of course it is going entirely. But there are just certain mechanisms that seem to be taking a very slow process, including the reporting of box office. Because presently, your grosses don't get reported within box office.
No, they do.
They are.
We leave it up to the filmmaker to report, and we also report when requested to. But yeah, Tugg grosses go towards the cumulative gross reported to Rentrack.
Which I think is very helpful. Yeah. Because again, you know, theatrical releasing tends to be, you need to gross a certain amount of money for the first week, which then allows you to stay in the theater, and the goal of staying in the theater is to create a level of word of mouth, which again, having early engagement with your audiences, you know, helps propel all of this all the way through. Tessa, why don't you talk just a little bit about, as you said, like how you are clearing through the clutter?
Yeah, so we are an old model too. I mean, broadcasters, that's what we're, you know, people said to me, oh, you're such a dinosaur, you CBC. And like, we're reinventing everything, same. You know, it's not 1913, it's like 1890 right now. We're just like, what is this that we're talking about? Our fundamental role is as content creators and collaborators in getting content created that we aren't doing ourselves. So we are in a model of, we used to operate in a model of scarcity. The only scarcity we have now is we are, I guess tastemakers is probably the wrong word, but you've only got so much time in your life. You want to know what is the thing that is worth watching right now. Our job is to help figure out what that ought to be from a TV perspective, and also from different genres, news, sports, all of that stuff that you're probably familiar with us producing or being involved in the production of. Where was I going with that? The thing is that the scarcity doesn't exist anymore. Scarcity still exists in the theatrical release space for you guys, but right now that doesn't exist for us. So we have to figure out what is the role that we have to play. The fundamental thing for us as a Canadian content creator in the video space is that we actually make our stuff, or we're very tightly associated with the collaboration of the creation of it. We don't rent content. We don't buy American shows and put them on our network. We make our own stuff, and we have great opportunities in either doing it ourselves or working very closely with the independent producer, if it's an independent production, to create that audience engagement from the very beginning. So we're working with Insight Productions actually on Battle of Blades. I'm just going to throw that out as an example. Watch over the next few weeks. It's going to start. You'll start to see what it is that we're trying to do with that audience. Look at how we're trying to actually use the audience to get them to keep coming back. But then also keep in mind that we're the Olympic broadcaster come February. We have a great opportunity with a show like Battle of Blades that leverages an enormous audience for us to then convert those folks into people that can't forget that we're also really involved with the sports and the Olympic side of things. So every little ounce of what we do is part of an ecosystem at CBC. So how do we move audience from here to there? Same thing that I'm sure that you guys are consumed with on how do you move somebody from this film to that film. But then also how do you make the audience feel like they own a piece of this story? We're the CBC, you already own it. That's full stop. Like the audience actually owns. If you're Canadian, you own this story. So how do we actually make that a meaningful thing for you that you actually care about it and want to participate in it more? I didn't sound too airy-fairy.
No, but I think it's an interesting comment about owning it. And John, I think you can sort of speak as certainly one of the early sort of adapters of the social media and are obviously an expert in the area and how you've seen it grown. And again, the level of engagement that's out there that does create a transaction.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, I could just tell a very quick story, about when I crowdfunded my short film Cerise back in 2010, when like crowdfunding was in its kind of infancy, and the only people that knew it were tech savvy, social media people, and I was just getting on. I had 6 months in on Twitter alone, and I was having fun because I didn't know what crowdfunding was. I never heard of it. So I was just talking to people about Stanley Kubrick and movies and all the stuff that you talk to people about. And ultimately, I decided to launch a campaign. And when I did, I said to myself, man, I hope I make this $5,000 extra. I did it wanting to raise money. And about, half a week into the campaign, I had to pause because my mind was totally blown. The people who were giving me money were not my family and my friends, which I constantly tell people that's where your first money comes from, family and friends. Because if the people that love you don't give you money, you don't stand a chance with the rest of the world. So they got to give you money. My family gave me nothing. People that were giving me 70% of my funding came from Twitter. People I'd never met in real life, IRL as they say, or they tweet rather. And I took a step back. And then I realized, wow, this isn't about money. This is not about it. I mean, it's great, it's going to come in, but it's really because I spent enough time getting to know these people, letting them in on the writing of the movie. I let them in. I was asking them, hey, what's a good name for this character? What's this? What's that? And they were responding to me back and forth. And I was just kind of writing my script in a different way, and I thought it was cool, but I didn't realize what it was doing. It was making these people feel like they owned a piece of my script. And they started feeling like they owned a piece of me a little bit, because then I would, they'd follow me and I'd talk about other things too. And, so they knew a lot about me. They would ask me, how's my cat doing, this and that. And then they'd be like, oh, by the way, I came up with a cool name for your cat, for your character in your script. And I'm like, great, let me hear it. These are the people who gave money. So that, and again, I love, two phrases that our CEO and, says at our company, Slava Rubin. He says, the world of transactions is on the way out. It's all about relationships now. And the first time I heard it, I was like, holy God, this is amazing. It's my kind of world. But it still makes money, which is the interesting thing. Because if you're not invested as an audience, nobody gives a shit, which means they're not going to pay. They're not going to pay for your stuff. They're not going to talk about it. Okay, even if you give it away for free, give it away for free. Why not? I spent probably 18 years doing that, with my content, free stuff. And now I can finally start making a little money on it, and it's great. But give it away for free, and then they'll come back to you. It's all because you're giving them something that nobody else is really doing in Hollywood. You're giving them a piece of this story. And as you all know, as storytellers, stories top. I mean, that's the fact. Whether you're on Twitter, even when you're spinning your own story and you're tweeting these little things every day, you're still telling stories, whether it's you, whether it's about your stuff, the material you're working on, whether you're crowdfunding for it and you're promoting it. I mean, and I can get into that like for days, the right way to do that and all. But it all goes down to, again, building that solid connection between you, your project, and most importantly, the audience. And there's ways to do it and ways not to. But.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point about sharing. And when I, many years ago, started, with a little bit of having a little education in social media, and it was coming out, and what is an effective way to engage in social media, particularly from a marketing PR, it was always about, it needs to be a mutually shared experience. You share, they share, and as you said, it becomes a relationship. Can we talk between everybody, sort of the relationship with their core audiences and being true to the core and understanding the core? Because I think that's very relevant to a certain level, of the successes.
Yeah, I think that's such an important question and a commonality of all of our perspectives. At Tugg, we focus on the promoter first and foremost, and that promoter is the person or the group who comes and selects the film that they want to see. And what's really interesting, a stat that is very tired at this point in the year, but if you haven't heard it yet, it's very interesting, that one word of mouth recommendation has the impact on an individual of over 200 television ads. And at first, it's very startling, but when you think about it, it's intuitive. When you hear from a friend, someone that you trust, whether it's a book or a film or a restaurant, the impact that that has on you and the likelihood that you will actually go and consume that is 200 times more likely than if you heard about that in an advertisement. So again, you think about reverse engineering, and right now we're in a time where you really could reverse engineer just about anything when you think about processes that were formerly founded on middle people, middle groups that to reach the masses, versus now where, as you just were describing, you're able to reach the masses, quite quickly on your own if you go about it the right way, or not on your own, but with a team of people around you. And so, at Tugg, we focus on that promoter, because that's the person who's the one who's going to reach out to their social network and be able to trigger conversion, monetization, much more likely than an advertisement would. And so that's who our core audience. Right now, for a year and a half, the conversion rate, the average conversion rate on one of our event pages, meaning the amount of people that look at an event page to those that purchase a ticket, is over 13.3%. When you compare that to an advertisement, it's startling. And that really is because of that word of mouth traction. And so, yeah, as we scale, whether it's, films in theaters, films outside of theaters, or different types of merchandise that we're encouraging filmmakers to be able to build in part of that experience to sell to their consumers, it's all predicated on that super fan who's able to then multiply. And going back to that One Direction example, even a band as big as that with a super fan base as robust, when we did a screening program with them a few weeks ago, when we first announced it, you'd see 20 people that would purchase tickets, 30 people for an event. The threshold might have been 150, 200 tickets. From there, the promoters are able to message out to those ticket buyers, then and encourage them to share. And then you see the conversion rate when those 20 people go and share voraciously through those social channels, and then how that multiplies, so on and so forth. You think about, people that come by way of crowdfunding, it's remarkable. And I think a lot of people think about, well, is it beneath our brand? Sometimes you still kind of hear people thinking that way. It is the greatest, speaking from a group that's on the front lines of marketing, trying to get films in theaters and get tickets purchased. We see it is remarkable to see the advantage that filmmakers have when they come by way of a crowdfunding strategy early on, because you come not just with that additional funding, but you come more importantly with a network of an army that is there waiting to be activated and to be, a call to action to run with.
And I would assume the satisfaction level is much greater because you've already been sort of predisposed. You've already become interested. You're walking in wanting to like it.
Wanting to like it, wanting to share it, and that is the greatest tool you can have at that point. As we all know, when you get to that point, you're thinking about marketing your film, the first question you ask is, well, who already cares about it? Before we start thinking about how do we convince people to care about it, the most important question up front is, who does this already mean something to? And when you think about community engagement early on, then you have so many different answers to that question versus starving for one or two at that point.
Definitely. It's with Indiegogo, it's kind of it's pretty massive. I mean, our target audience is the whole world. It's like, anybody, anywhere can fund anything. I mean, that's a bold statement. So I'm going to speak specifically from the film world, but we have a saying at Indiegogo. We've found, data-wise and all that stuff. I'm not a big data guy, but I know a few little things. People tend to give money and time and attention to the people behind the projects, not necessarily to their projects. So again, and again, that's, we see some good projects coming out, we see some not so good projects, but the bottom line is they did something right. They engaged that audience enough. Somebody cared about it, and that's the beauty of living today, is somebody somewhere will care about what you have, no matter what, and you can do something with it. And that's what Indiegogo strives to do, is empower these, every single one of us to go out there and spread the word and find those super fans, those influencers who, if you say something, they're going to jump on board first. They're going to get their friends to jump on board. I mean, just on Twitter alone, we have a hashtag #GoGoFilm. And I can't tell you how many influencers we have that as soon as I start posting about a project, they're on top of it. Oh, check this out. And it goes to their friends, and then they have a hashtag #SupportIndieFilm. And all of a sudden now this whole other audience of people who follow this get wind of it, and that project gets funded. I won't say fairly easily. I was about to, but then I'm like, this shit's not easy at all. It's hard work. It takes dedication, but it could be fun. And you walk away with something that no studio, nobody else is going to give you. You got the audience. The money's great, but you've got the audience, and that's the key thing. And that's again just Indiegogo's that's what we do. That's what we want to do, and that's why they bring on people like me to kind of help give folks that maybe don't necessarily have that net worth, I guess, playing on the word net. They're not on Twitter much. The Facebook is like lame. They go on there just to put pictures of their dog and cat, and that's about it. And maybe the food if we're lucky, And we have to change that. We have to realize that these social media platforms are the future, and it's here now. And we can use it for that stuff, and we should, but we can also use it to spread the word about our projects, the things we really do care about as content creators. YouTubers know this better than anyone in the world. They've been doing it since YouTube started, right? And they know how to drive traffic, they know how to bring people, and they know how to comment. And I was at VidCon recently, and that was the one thing that kind of really impressed me with every YouTuber I spoke to. They said the secret of our success is not the content that we put out. Some of them admitted, some of our content sucks, but we know our audience, and when they tell us it sucks, we ask them, oh, great, why? Why did you think it sucked? They talk to them, which means they own it. They're co-owners. It's a wonderful thing. We as filmmakers need to always learn to keep that in mind and do it.
Tessa, yes, please.
Sure. So maybe it applies on the sort of live event release of a film. So I'm going to use it as an example. I hope it's not too forced. But last fall we did a show called Over the Rainbow, casting Dorothy for the Wizard of Oz. We worked with Temple Street Productions on that one. When it first came into the CBC, it was like they were making a TV show with phone voting. And as Jay, you know, because you've worked with us in the past as well, I hate phone voting more than anything else because it's a dead end. I don't know anything about the audience. I don't know anything. It could be a kid in his basement that's written a script and it's just auto-calling. So it doesn't tell me a thing, and I'm sure it's not that pleasant or fun and positive experience. So we worked with the producers to figure out a way to make that a much more engaging thing. So you actually had to earn your votes in that show using social platforms, using things that we could measure in the real world. On those platforms, but then we also got people out into the real world, because I think when we talk about this as well, it's really important that you don't forget that the social platforms are just a fragment. The biggest majority of people's choices are happening in what's called dark social. Sounds ominous, but it's actually it's those conversations that you have on the subway. They've always been happening. We can now see a part of that in the social platforms, but this conversation that people are having at their dinner table tonight about what movie they're going to go to or what book they're going to read next or whatever, that is a fundamental thing. You've got to get them talking about your stuff. You're not ever going to be able to measure it. You're never going to know if it really happened, but I'm absolutely positively sure that it's having an impact, and we just can use the social platforms as a barometer to try to predict a bit of how that's working. And I'll end the Over the Rainbow discussion with the normal way that rating patterns work on reality shows is a bat wing. Starts really high, goes down, then comes back up again for the finale so everybody can find out who won. This show was constant. It was pretty much steady. I've never seen a reality show do this before, but I fully believe that that's because of the fact that we let the audience feel like they owned the story and they had to participate to keep the thing moving forward. So figure out what that means in the story that you're trying to tell. Maybe it doesn't apply, and that's totally fine too. You'll have to find a different way. But if there's anything that you can give the audience to have as a critical role, if you can cast them in any way in the story that you're trying to tell, you've probably gone 90% of what you need to do.
Yes. So just building on what the big minds on the panel have already said, we really we believe that this is the age of the filmmaker entrepreneur. Like, this is the age of the entrepreneur that we live in. And the way you should think about your production and the team you put together is like a startup company. So that means if you're a startup company, if we're in the Valley, your basically default setting is fail. So you have to go out in the market and do whatever you can to change that setting, because that's ultimately where probably 95% of independent movies go. So just have that in the back of your brain at all times. So part of our platform is to enable not only the discovery, but for you to build audience equity, and that's what you're talking about, is relationships. Starting with your friends and family, then going out to your seed, which might be their friends or your town or your social media network, and then going out abstract, which is your Series A, which is the whole country or people that like this genre, and then super abstract, which would be your Series B, which is just international insanity. And obviously throughout that, throughout our process, you actually get that suture with your audience or that connection through the missions you do every week, through the way you build your project, where it's not just like you submit a script and just wait for people to give you a long maybe on if they're going to make it or not. So, you know, the point of the matter is we also believe in making the fan a star too, just as much as turning the filmmaker into a rock star. And all of our challenges we give filmmakers, it's basically to promote themselves. Because if you think about your fans like the investor in you, investors don't actually invest in the product, they invest in the entrepreneur. So a lot of it is to turn filmmakers into rock star, to make sure you guys can give great interview, to make sure you're brave and you can go out into the world and you can sell yourself. So you, in fact, are more than white letters on a black screen. And that's kind of what this age enables people to do. You know, just to give you an idea, the superfan in our case got to go, we flew them to Banff, and they sat on a panel with the biggest distributor in the country, which was E1, one of the biggest producers, Robert Lantos, and Michael Kennedy. So the superfan was there as kind of one of the dragons asking the really hard question, pulling them off Twitter and doing that stuff. So we believe in the whales in the casino as well, and you got to take care of those whales because they're going to drive 80% of everything you do. And we didn't just, you know, we did with that in mind, like just to give you a metric, yeah, we did about 20 million social impressions with those 92 teams. But that's not the impressive stuff. The impressive stuff is they did 500 pieces of earned traditional media, like print, radio, and television. And that's where things, again, it's not just about what you do on the social web, which is now a broadcast medium, but it's what you do outside of that. Like parties are important, events are important. That fear of missing out is very important. So really when you think about things, you know, again, an entrepreneur isn't a business person, they're a visionary. It's not that you just got to be creatively well-rounded anymore, but you need to be marketing well-rounded. And you also have to have a little bit of business acumen at the bottom and know this is film business and not film friends. And I guess that's...
No, I think it's one of a very accurate statement at the end is that it is a business. And that in these cases, these are not for-profit businesses, these are for-profit businesses. And so as that entrepreneur, not only do you have the creative responsibility, you do have the financial responsibility, and I think it's an important element that needs to be relevant and respected within the process. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. I wanted to open some questions up to the audience also. If anybody has any questions, there are some microphones for our panelists. The gentleman right back there.
Hi, my name's Adam. I've got a question for Jay. Sure. I'm wondering about Cinegroup and co-productions, and in terms of rights and international rights, what happens with that and whether you're open to co-productions.
Yeah, everything's negotiable. So at the end of the day, you know, cash is king. Let's talk about it. But in terms of us, we're never like, yes, we have a true option process. There is a certain amount of ownership of IP and worldwide rights and ancillary and all that stuff. You know, we believe we're very, very filmmaker friendly. You know, our options right now are for 1 year because we don't want to hold on to something we can't make. We want to make sure that you can get back out in the world, and if we don't feel that we can do it in enough time, get enough of when we start to put our engine behind it and our network, then and within that opportunity, absolutely, you as an entrepreneur should be out there working just as hard as our internal team of the stuff that we've put physical, hard skin in the game in. So if you said, I've got a great co-production, and if you're Canadian, as you know, we have the most co-production treaties in the world, which is fabulous. This is absolutely on the table. If you bring equity in, that changes the deal too. So, you know, like I say, it's all about being agile and flexible. We're not, you have to do things this way. So I hope that answers your question.
Do you also have an ancillary package with your distribution? Because I think the fact that you have this relationship with a theater chain is an incredible asset, because many people make films without ever knowing how they're going to recoup, which is sort of one of the fundamental issues. So I'm just curious if the ancillary is part of that or just the theatrical.
Yeah. So we can look at that as a case-by-case basis. We can go a very kind of, you know, just say we do a theatrical in Canada and do date-and-date releasing every other market in the world. We could go, as we talked about before, with a Film Buff or Gravitas or somebody like that. It might make sense that when the film has done, maybe Brad has done a really great, incredible job at an AFM, and we actually have all of these territories and some upfront, you know, some MGs and stuff like that, and there's some really strong people that can take that to market there. So I really think you need to look at each, because you can put a documentary into Cinecou, you could put like a Matthew Barney, like art crazy piece. We're very democratic that way. So I don't believe there's one model for that. I think that would be.
So you can customize it
Yeah.
piece by piece. Yes, ma'am.
This question is for Tessa. You said earlier that you want. Hi, Tessa. You said earlier that you wanted to make the audience feel they own the content at CBC. I'm Canadian. I don't feel I own the content at CBC, so can you please elaborate on that, please?
Do you watch any of it or listen to any of it? Do you listen to CBC Radio or watch anything?
Yes.
And do you keep coming back?
Sometimes.
Yeah. It really depends on what show it is we're talking about. I mean, you do own the CBC. As a Canadian, you do. If you don't feel connected to the content, that's a problem. It depends on what you like, and it depends on what kinds of things you want to get involved with. The other thing, too, is that it's not, we will put things out there, but it's also, the audience has some responsibility in that, and I would say especially in news. Especially in news. It's a fundamental role of a public broadcaster right now to get people talking about things, and that's what we do. If the audience isn't actually talking about it, we have a larger societal issue at Art too. So if you're not connecting with something at CBC, I'd love to know more about the types of shows that you are watching. Some of them, we may not produce them. I know Duck Dynasty is the #1 show on Canadian Airways right now. We would never make that show.
I actually don't own a television or radio. Everything I do is on the computer.
Yeah, you can access everything that we produce, almost everything we produce from a computer as well. Depends on where you live as well. We do have some challenges there, for sure.
Hello, I have a question for Nicholas. You said something like you was securing audience to the movie theater. I didn't really get this process. Like, can you say a little bit more about this? About your unique distribution idea?
Sure. Yeah. Basically, you know, any movie theater where there's an individual that wants to see a film, they select the film, and they're told how many tickets they need to pre-sell within a certain amount of time. And once they reach that tipping point, and if it's within that amount of time, then the event occurs. It happens, and Tugg takes care of the rest with the content owners in terms of making sure the event occurs seamlessly. So basically, it creates a risk-free process for theaters. That threshold, so say it's 70 tickets, that covers all of the costs associated with that event, from the content owner's rental, the theater's rental, the promoter's margin. We actually incentivize the promoter and give them a stake in that ticket sale, as well as everything else logistically involved with the event.
And then afterwards, what is this? There's a split with the producer or the content provider?
That's right. Basically, the content provider gets a fixed amount that they set up front, which helps drive the threshold. So at the point of the threshold, the content owner has gotten whatever they have said they need in order to approve that event. And then every ticket sold above the threshold, the content owner is still participating on a majority margin.
On a majority margin. I'm going to see over here.
Sorry, quick follow-up to what you were just saying. Do you ever sort of bring out the filmmaker? Like, how far in deep to the planning of the event do you go in? Like, will you bring out the filmmaker, like set up Q&As? I know that's sort of a draw, especially for towns who don't usually get that kind of thing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
we encourage filmmakers to get very creative. That's one of the most exciting things about the digitization of theaters, for instance, is that you can be programming pre-show content. The way that musicians have opening acts, filmmakers can now have short films to start it. We see a lot of promoters hosting pre-discussions ahead of the film to help act as a prelude to the film, and then post-discussion panels like this, whether it's with the filmmakers, if they are able to get to that community, virtually or physically, or even community leaders, spokespeople within the community that are talking about the film and related, you know, issues within that town. So it becomes usually we find, I mean, we've had cases where there have been comedians doing stand-up shows before a comedy. We've had a mariachi band and a documentary about immigrants in America. It's remarkable. The experience itself is as creative as the content projected on screen. And so we're encouraging filmmakers to really think deep and hard about what do they want to do to help provide the tools to eventize those screenings. So the answer is yes, and we provide those tools for filmmakers to be able to decorate those events, you know, how they wish.
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly speaking, as a person who saw a screening that was made possible because of Tugg for a feature-length musical by a good friend of mine that I met on Twitter, Gary King, called How Do You Write a Joe Sherman Song? It was held at the Sunshine Theater, which in New York is like a dream theater for independent filmmakers to screen at. Wouldn't have happened without an organization like Tugg. And Gary, again, through number one, he's a naturally stunning individual. Like, you talk to him and it's like you just want to be him. That's the bottom line. And, his personality in reality comes across beautifully through Twitter, through Facebook, through his engagement with his audience, and through Tugg when he was basically campaigning to get, I forget how many, I feel like it was like 140 was the cap on that one. And he hit that and went, it was amazing. And, at the screening, he was there, he gave a little speech. And again, it's, the way I look at Tugg is it's crowdfunding for your distribution, because the same ideas that bind what we do at Indiegogo is the same thing with Tugg. You have to reach out, and there's plenty of filmmakers who are doing this, but you have to also now stand out and make sure your film gets seen. So you have to be creative when you're promoting, and you have to be creative. You have to offer people a little bit more than just that screening, even if it's a simple talk or a Q&A at the end. I mean, how awesome is that when you watch a film and there's a Q&A at the end? Sometimes when there's not, you're like, really? This is all I got? Oh, screw that. Experience. So you guys
Well, and I
doing
think
great.
that even now goes back during production, right? Is that where you're creating this audience from the very beginning in some cases, and so that they can follow you all the way through. And I think a lot of people are doing it. The only word of caution that I say about cultivating these audiences during production is don't show too much of the production. People, you don't want to overshare. You want people to still come to it. And the other thing is, it is a creative process. And what you do on day one may not be what you're doing on day 30. And then when you're in post, you may look at it and say, you know what, I thought that was going to work, that didn't work. So I think you have to do this with a certain level of discipline, so that you can continuously engage the audience in a certain level. I mean, you don't have to be right all the time, clearly, right? You can have a discussion, but it is not always by committee. There has to be some, a vision to it. So anyway, next question. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. This is all great, but my question is for Nicholas. It's kind of two parts. First of all, you mentioned right now Tugg is only in the US, but do you have to be American to set up screenings? And second of all, how does that relate to Academy qualifications?
It's a great question. You can be of any origin to set up a screening through Tugg.
No passport required.
No passport required. You can do that, and definitely encourage you to. If you have people that you could influence and mobilize in America, definitely go on and do it. In terms of Academy qualifying, we have, for that purpose and for other purposes where filmmakers want to include a traditional booking arm within their theatrical strategy, we have created what we call Tugg Plus, where basically you can utilize, it's more of a service deal basis where we can achieve, the qualifying criteria for you, as well as, in other cases, whether it's for day and date purposes, people want to reach a certain city threshold months ahead so that they can work with the MSOs on that, then we can also, work in that way. That is less of the crowdsourcing behavior and more of a traditional arm that then feeds perfectly in with the crowdsourcing behavior.
Question? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Mike. Hello. I've got a series that I'm working on right now. It's an original web series, and we've sort of plateaued with our growth when it comes to our social presence on Twitter, Facebook, on all the social platforms that we're on, YouTube. Do you guys have any strategies that we can use that might be universal for everybody to help kind of reinvigorate a campaign that you're running?
What's your what's the thing about? What's the series about? Real quick, I need a little help sometimes.
Sure, it's like an epic geek comedy series. So it's a web series original that was funded through the Independent Production Fund here in Canada. So it's a high budget geek comedy web series.
And you're having trouble, and it's a geek comedy?
It's just its growth has slowed now.
I hear you. Every time, this is what I call in crowdfunding, at least, and in general, in anything, it's called the lull. At some point, you just kind of plateau, and you can either kind of keep plateauing, or you look at it as an opportunity just to kind of do something totally off the wall different. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes we have to do things that, so there's two ways to look at things. There's a way, there's the business way to look at it, where, oh, I could do that, but it's not going to be worth my time or my effort, and monetarily, and you don't do it. And then there's looking at it the way I look at it, and the way I look at everything as a person, because I have no business training, period. So my thing is, do whatever the hell you need to do. Quick example I can give without taking too much time. One of the things that I did when I ran a campaign was I wrote poems for people, because I'm a poet. And that's what my degrees tell me anyway. And my paycheck back in the day, you don't want to see it. And basically I wrote poems for each person at the $10 level. Now, when I tell people to do stuff like that, they're like, that's a great idea, Trigg, amazing, I love it. I could probably get $50 if I wrote people and I'm like, actually, no, you won't get anybody giving you anything if you started at what it's worth. You have to give something low, $10, because when I set mine at $10, I had a $20 perk. I had a $50 perk. $20 got you a DVD, $20 got you a t-shirt, $50 got you a DVD copy of my film. Most people are going to say, oh, wow, for $50, I can still get this poem, which I want for 10, but I want the movie too. Let me do that. And you build up that, and it's really just building up interest in what else you have to offer. So something like that, you're working with, geek comedy, get on, I'm hoping you guys are on Twitter. Hashtag every possible thing you can. Don't overdo it. But with that, start offering more of the content, what it's about. Get the audience involved. And again, making up the names, making up characters. Our thing as creators is sometimes we also get a little prioritary, I guess is the word, if it's a word. It's ours, we want it. That's totally dead today. That's total death.
It goes back to the sharing.
Yeah, it's just share it. You may not like it, but you don't have to take it, but you could be like, that's a great name, but I don't know if Jeremiah is going to work for this geek comedy. Let's, maybe come up with Jeremy. Stuff like that, but you can always just make your crowd a part of it, and they'll love it.
We have time for one last question. Yes, sir.
I'm wondering about, so this idea of sharing and whatnot, if people are contributing elements to your story, how do you, mitigate that when it comes to errors and omissions?
As it comes to, I'm sorry.
Errors and omissions. Like if somebody is claiming, oh, well, I actually suggested the name for that character. Subsequently, I own a part of your film.
It's a really good subject for a whole panel. It's a great question. No, I mean, it's a great question. Yeah, I mean.
It's a whole new form of business affairs, frankly, at this point, in many studios and in law firms right now, the way social media affects the rights and liabilities, or or whatever, has become a huge practice, and I think it's not known at this point either. I think you probably have to have an awful lot of disclaimers, but
you just want to make sure that that's not why you're not necessarily doing something. Don't let the rules first stop you. That's what I would suggest as a disruptor, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, just on that one last thing, I don't worry about that, only because nobody else in America is worried about it at this point, and I'm on top of this. I mean, the thing is, even with crowdfunding, you're buying into a perk, so there's obviously you just bought that, and that's it, so that's kind of clear. But with the creative stuff, it's you're making it communal. My whole thing is, if Ed Burns isn't worried about it, we shouldn't be, because Ed Burns is the main guy who's doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, there's a few things depending on if whatever context you put around it. You could put it in a terms of service if you wanted to, if you're really concerned about it. You can always buy insurance, which insurance guys. But yeah, no, there's a lot of things whenever you're the first through the wall, there's a lot of potential blowback, and everybody on this stage is pretty much I can assume is we don't generally ask permission. Sometimes we have to ask forgiveness if we get caught. And that's a good way to, going on record here, to kind of live in this kind of world. And, if one person really wants to go to bat for you, if you have a big community behind you, there's a big backlash that happens, when that kind of bullshit happens. People, I wish I had an answer for you. I've never seen a case where somebody gave someone something so small in a social conversation where they felt that that was proprietary to them and therefore they should own a piece of this. It would be very interesting to see how that would go down. I wish I had a better answer for you in that capacity. I think you should always use common sense. I think is at the end of the day of how you position that. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to all of you. And enjoy your afternoon.